Good evening. My name is Bonna and I serve as the president of the Asia Society Texas Center. Our topic tonight is about sponsorship and mentorship. We have Katherine Liu with us as one of our panelists. She is the VP of Strategy and Business Development with Viacom International Media. Katherine's work spans more than 160 countries, and she oversees 10 plus unique media brands. Also with us is Peggy Roe. She is with Marriott International, and she serves as the Global Officer of Customer Experience, Loyalty, and New Ventures. Peggy travels 3 times a month, I think is what I heard today. She has oversaw the opening of 700 hotels in 21 countries. Thank you, Peggy. Thank you, Katherine, so much for joining us for tonight's conversation. It's going to be wonderful. As you know, it's well documented that the C-suites in the boardrooms of Fortune 500 companies are overwhelmingly white and male. The data shows that 80% are men, 72% of those men are white. So the barriers to advancement for women and minorities in the organization tends to be structural and rooted in unconscious bias. While this is not intentional, it does create an insular way of cultivating talent. So Katherine, let's start with you. What can companies be doing differently when it comes to supporting the development of APA communities?
Sure, and thanks for the question and thanks for having me here. It's great to be here. I think 2 big things that we need help on are advocacy and visibility. Speaking generally, we tend to be great employees, hard workers, good team members, hardworking, great people to work with and work for, but we're not necessarily great advocates for ourselves. So I think we and all of us, we need to raise our hand. We need to speak up. We need to be part of the conversations that are going on in corporate life. We need to actually engage in corporate culture and be part of forming that corporate culture. And I think we need to embrace the opportunity to speak up and do what we do so well visibly and be out there and advocate for ourselves. And that really allows the younger generation of talent to look up and see that Asian Americans are all over corporate America doing incredible things at all kinds of levels. Peggy just being one example, and that it's really possible for you. And it's possible and normal and expected. And I think once we can open up that dialogue and really take it upon ourselves to start engaging in a bigger way than just being great hard workers, it'll really start to open doors for us. And I'm excited that this conversation is starting to happen, I think, across the country.
Katherine, you're speaking from experience. It's pretty clear. Was there an aha moment during your career that made you comfortable being part of the leadership to navigate this?
Well, I think I mentioned earlier, when I was coming up with my career, the only Asian American woman I could think of in business was Andrea Jung, who was running Avon at the time. Every other Asian American professional that I knew was either a doctor or an engineer, and that was not in the cards for me. So it was, I was hoping there was a path in business, but I wasn't sure. And I think one thing you have to understand is if you want to make an impact in corporate America, it's not enough to just work hard. You really have to be savvy about how corporate America works. And you need to advocate for yourself. You need to create internal networks. You need to go out there, raise your hand, volunteer, speak up. That wasn't necessarily natural to me. I thought that if I just worked hard, someone would notice and that would work. And that's how it works in school, right? But that's not how it works in corporate America. And I think that over time, I really learned to sort of find my voice, speak up, raise my hand. And actually, I think everyone at this level has had a few mentors and some help along the way. And hopefully I'm at the point now where I can do that for other people as well, including forums like this.
Great. Peggy, was there an aha moment for you to help you realize that you needed to speak up and be at the forefront also?
I love what Katherine has said, because I think I echo much of the sentiment that she has mentioned around having role models, examples, and then also just having the dialogue. And I think the aha moments are sometimes hard to see when you're in them, but in reflection, right? I was sharing earlier how many people along the way have nudged me one way or the other. And it's really those moments that stand out to me as the aha moments now. Like, one of my bosses said early on, you have to make it clear where you're trying to go, or the organization will decide for you, right? And you have to proactively tell that story and talk to people about it. And it was like a simple comment, but, I know now how important that advice was. And I think I'll put another lens on it, which is I spent the last 7 years in Asia as the Chief Sales and Marketing Officer of Asia Pacific, where I worked across 21 countries in Asia. And I saw such a different experience with women across those markets in terms of their attitudes towards leadership, their response. But in every market, just me being in the position I was in, I was surprised at how impactful that could be on its own. And so many women coming up to me and saying, just seeing you in that job makes me believe it's possible. Right. And so it's just so important for, us to be in that space and then represent it and then help people with the dialogue. I do believe it's much about the conversation that makes it happen. It's not really about the quotas and the numbers.
Well, what you just shared really emphasized the importance of representation. So thank you. Let's stay with Peggy for a little bit. Peggy, so from your perspective, how do you distinguish the difference between mentorship and sponsorship? And while both are important, at this moment in time right now, which one do you think is the greater need to build up minority and minority groups?
Yeah, I think about those two things differently from my perspective as a leader, right? But in the way, when I'm talking to someone, whether I'm mentoring them or sponsoring them, I think it's much the same, right? I'm listening to them, hearing what their interests and passions and strengths, opportunities areas are, and responding to that. But in my own mind, I'm asked to mentor a lot of people, give them guidance along the way. I often find people that I will sponsor because I've done some work with them or I have an experience with them. And I will nudge them a little bit harder to see them sort of move in their careers.
Beautiful. Thank you. So you both are so passionate about women's growth and empowerment. I'm curious to know from your perspective, do you see men or women serving as mentors, men or women serving as mentors or sponsors? Which one, which category, and what are the reasons behind it?
I'll give this one a shot. I don't actually know if I see a big difference from a gender perspective. What I have seen in the past, and I would be curious to know if this is what both of you have seen as well, I see a lot of formal mentorship programs just fail miserably, honestly. I think a lot of them they kind of fizzle out. People just don't get engaged. And after you get over like the kind of very difficult logistics of pairing people up, finding a meeting schedule, getting them to connect, they kind of don't get anything out of it. And the whole program fades. At the same time, there are a lot of amazing relationships that form. And, spontaneously sometimes, I think some of it goes back to what Peggy was saying. A lot of it is on the mentee, if you will, really having a good sense of what they're looking for and what they want out of that relationship and why it's important for them to be talking to, this person and what questions they have and what they want. And I think from a company perspective, you have to make it clear that this is something that is not just nice to do. Your senior executives need to commit to doing this and to being there for junior talent. I don't think that falls disproportionately on men or women. But I do think that if you don't have those pieces in place, it's not really going to work so well. And you can't just rely on just two people happening to be a fit through a program. It takes a little bit more than that.
I would agree with that. I kind of see equal mentorship and sponsorship coming from both the women and men leaders in my organization, and I've been the lucky recipient of both from both male leaders that I've had and women. And in my last job, I dual reported to both a man and a woman. And so I was getting mentored at the same time. I joked around about how it was a little bit like mom and dad, but it was, it's hard for me to say whether there is a bias one way or the other. But I would agree with Katherine in that I think the informal mentorship programs work better. And I've seen that executed in ways if, someone might ask me to mentor someone, right? A peer of mine or a leader of mine may say, I see somebody in the organization that I think could benefit from your leadership and your mentorship. And I think those have worked out well as I teach my teams, like, you need your own board of directors, right? And you should decide who's going to mentor you in your own career path and pick people inside the company, outside the company, friends, peers, and create your own board and reach out to them, make them your mentors. And I think I've seen that work as well.
I just want to say, I love that concept of creating your own board of directors. And it sort of picks up on a concept that I think people don't hear enough, which is that you really need to do the thinking and know what you yourself want and what you need and what's going to drive you forward versus what's going to hold you back in your own head. And just to cite another, terrific Asian American woman, Angela Duckworth at UPenn does some great work on grit and resilience, but she also talks a lot about metacognition, which is a concept I really like. It's the idea of thinking about how you think and thinking about what's going to drive you forward and thinking about what's going to hold you back. And I think part of what Peggy's idea around the board of directors is like, what do you have? What's your skill set? What are you lacking? Where are you going to get that support? Look around the company, look at your peers, look at your bosses, look at your colleagues, and see what is out there that's going to work for you and how you can build a relationship together. That's a lot more thinking than a formal corporate program is going to hand to you if you just sign up for a mentor. So I think that work is something that we have to do actively. And I will also say, kind of going back to a little bit of what we talked about before, that was not something that we talked about, around the dinner table with mom and dad. It was really more about getting good grades and working hard. This whole metacognition and thinking about what you want, and that wasn't really part of my DNA. So it was a learned skill, but hopefully it's something that we can pass on because I think it's critical no matter, where you're trying to go.
So, Katherine, I loved what you say, and it sounds that others listening to this conversation can take away from that practical advice. Can you break it down a little bit more, though?
Yeah, I think, so I do a lot of, as Peggy said, informal mentoring, which is basically just people saying, I found your name and whatever, or someone referred me to you, can we just chat? And what I always tell them when I try to ask them where their head is at and what they want. And so I actually go through a list of questions with them. And I say, okay, so tell me this. When was the last time you were genuinely excited about something? You read something, you saw something, you heard something, that you just really thought, this is amazing. I can't get this out of my head. I want to do more of that. Figure out what that is. And you need to build a career, a life around that. And I'm not talking about the latest social media blow up or Twitter explosion, that doesn't count. I'm talking about something genuine and organic to you that really made you just, lose sleep, can't stop thinking about it, whatever it is. You got to hold on to that. And the opposite is the last time you just lost it. I can't take this anymore. This is so frustrating. Oh my God, whatever it is. And again, it's not because you got into a traffic accident because that would upset anybody. What are those things that are organic to you that really drive you forward and don't? And, the other ways to get around this are, just to give you another simple example, if you had an hour to spend and you could do one of the following 5 things, what would you do? You can either talk to someone, you can go for a walk, you can listen to music, you can draw a picture, or you can read a book. And I think your instinctive answer to that actually gives you some clues into your personality and what you gravitate towards. There's a bunch of other examples, are you good at selling something? What would you do in this situation? But those kinds of simple questions, I think, give you clues into what actually drives you, even if you're not consciously thinking about it. And I think we have to get into the habit of knowing ourselves at that level if we really want to form strong relationships and further our careers.
Great. Thank you. Peggy, I would love to hear some practical advices that you would have for the rising APA employee wishing and looking for a mentor or sponsor.
It's funny because Katherine, you said exactly the same approach that I usually take with the women and men actually that I mentor. And I feel like people often say to me, because I'll say to those who come to me, well, you should pick 2 paths. What are the 2 next jobs that you want to go get, right? And then let's figure out how to get you there. And most of the time people say to me, well, I don't really know, right? And I don't know how to figure out how to get there. And so it's about that sort of intrinsic, looking inside of you and understanding, where is that passion? Where's the flame created from? And you have to look inside and do a little outside exploration before you can figure it out. And so I think for many women, I've also said to them, you're the only one standing in your way, right? And so get out of your own way, forge your own path, and don't let anyone else define for you, what your future looks like. And that would be my advice.
So we're talking to 2 very dynamic leaders, and the mental processes that you have for yourself, it's pretty clear that can be done. But as you know, if you were raised by traditional Asian parents, you were told not to ask for help. You were told, like Katherine said, You work hard, you're kind of in the background, you hope to get noticed by your grades, right? Nothing else. How do you help the APA community unlearn that or learn how to be comfortable at the forefront? It's easy to say, look at all of these things, where do you want to go, and process it logically, but it's still a very much mental hurdle for most people. Any advice on that?
I mean, I think things are getting a little easier and a little better. There's a couple amazing movements out right now. For better or worse, obviously some of the violence that's happened in our community has sparked a lot of people to action. But there's a couple of incredible movements that I've seen that I think are helping a younger generation. I know for one example is a whole movement to basically list out all the different companies that you interact with every single day that have been founded by Asian Americans or Asians. And that's, I mean, there's too many to list, but it's such a big part of our life that we don't actually recognize. And I think being very aware of that and putting that out in the public, I think helps at a young age, because you realize that Asians in corporate America it's not unusual at all. This is very, very normal. That's thing number one. I think thing number two is, if you want to just be really old fashioned about it, like, this is your homework. Okay. Like, this is not like a nice to have. This is not like a, maybe you can do it after you get your homework done. Like, no, this is the homework. I mean, I got to tell you, contrary to what you were taught, hard work it's not just hard. It's not just working hard and hoping that someone notices you, because truth be told, you could probably spend 40 minutes of the hour working hard and another 20 minutes kind of strategizing and finding the right person and networking and whatever. And that'll actually get you pretty far. I wouldn't necessarily advocate that path for med school, but we're not in a med school panel right now. We're talking about corporate America. So I think we just need to be honest with ourselves about that. And we need to support it ourselves. Another friend of mine has started a fund that's investing in startups explicitly founded by Asian Americans. And it's an incredible thing, because this doesn't exist, but it really just gives a lot of people a shot. And particularly at a young level, at a young age, I like to think that it widens the conversation, and it makes the world that, a 25-year-old is going into a lot more open and kind of filled with more possibility, shall we say.
Great, thank you. Peggy, any practical advice?
Yeah, I'll just tag on to that. I think that on the homework comment, I like that. I guess a lot of times you might put like your career or thinking about yourself to the side, right? I'll get to that when I'm done with my work, right? I'm very focused on getting my work done. And as we all know today, work could consume pretty much your entire life if you want to let it. And so I had somebody tell me early on, like, you almost have to think about that 80-20 rule about how you're spending your time. And if your life and your career are most important to you, see if you can flip it, right? How much time can you create in your life to actually plan what you're going to do for your future and make time for it? And so I think that's a little bit along the lines of doing your homework. And then I'll give a different spin on it as a mom. I think that upon reflection growing up, one of the things that my parents always said to me is, you can do anything you want, right? And I don't know if that's odd for Asian parents or not, but my dad's an entrepreneur, and my mom, just heart of gold. And I think they always told me that. And I feel like in retrospect, like they are the ones that empowered me to believe what I believe today and to get past all of the things that seem like barriers. And so I'm experimenting a little bit with that with my own kids.
Wonderful. I would love to hear from you, either one of you. What are some of the barriers that you believe will hinder the executives or the high-level directors from serving as sponsors or mentors? And what can companies do to remove those barriers?
I think, quite honestly, I think the biggest barrier is just a very practical thing. People just don't have the time, and people are stressed, particularly now. And if companies don't prioritize this, and that when I say prioritize it, I don't mean just say it and tell everybody to do it. Like, the CEO ideally should be having a breakfast once a month with junior staff. And if the CEO can find time to do it, everyone else can. So I think a lot of it is actually sits with the companies making it clear that this is a priority across the board, and then and living that principle. Another small thing is just that when you do set up these formal programs, which, as we both discussed, don't always work that well, you need to support them and think them through, give people tools to work with. Not everyone's cut out to be a mentor. And even if they are, they're not always cut out to have these somewhat tough conversations with people about tough topics. So sometimes they need a little help along the way to know how this works. And I think that would actually go a long way.
I agree with that. And it's part of the culture, right? And you have to create that culture from the top. And as a leader of your team, or if you're the CEO, I think that's the only way. I've been lucky at Marriott. I live in a culture where that has been really the default for a very long time. And so the way we are taught to coach and mentor people, at levels of the organization is sort of embedded in what we do. It's been hard, to be honest, in the last year, right, to make the time for that and to keep up with that. But I've been talking a lot to my team about, when you have a one-on-one with someone, just some practical advice, right? Like, let's start with asking about our people first, right? Because you can get to the list of things that you need to follow up on, and then you'll run out of time, right? So start with, how's the team doing? How are you doing, right? And then see where the conversation goes. And just that simple switch, I think, is about prioritization of time and putting people first.
Thank you. Katherine, you mentioned that you've seen sponsorship programs in corporations that failed terribly. Can you think of a sponsorship program, not a mentorship program, but a sponsorship program that actually worked well?
Yeah, broadly speaking, I can. I wasn't involved in this program, but there's something called, it used to be called SEO, which I think was Sponsorship for Educational Opportunity. I don't know if that program still exists, but my point is it brought people out of university into, I think, with banking jobs at the time. That was the focus, and when I was involved in it. And I think what was so great about it was that it was a holistic program that from start to finish not only got you a job and got you a mentor, but also got you into a group of people, of like-minded people, and got you into a community, if you will. And so it wasn't just sort of you and this other person kind of on your own, figure it out. We want you guys to meet once a month and check in and let us know how it's going. There was a whole program around it and a whole community that you joined, and you became part of a family. And I think people who are in that program, they still connect now. 15, 20 years later, I think they keep in touch with each other. There's a whole sense of identity and pride around that program. But I think it's because that program really thought about the person holistically and thought about all the barriers to two people coming together and making time. And just did all the thinking to remove the barriers, make it frictionless, be there, be supportive. That takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, honestly. But I think sometimes that is what it takes. The other thing I guess I would say is, to Peggy's example, sometimes the informal conversations where it's like, I've been watching this person for a long time. I know them pretty well. I have really good reasons to know that this person could really benefit from this other relationship. That's also going to go very far. But of course, you can't force that kind of thing to happen. I think the best thing you can do, as I said before, is to put yourself out there, be visible, be thoughtful about what you want. And hopefully those opportunities can come along.
Thank you. Peggy, some of the best examples or practices of sponsorship within a corporation.
Yeah, maybe I'll talk about something different. When I went to Asia, we started what was called a Women in Leadership Forum. And it started with the intent of having a conference and getting women from all over Asia together. And to be honest, when I helped sponsor it and set it up, I wasn't sure how it's going to play out. I was like, let's just get these women together and see what happens, right? We had some programming content and to my, I guess I should have expected this, but it was pretty amazing, like the energy that you would feel when you have that many women, 75, 100 women in the room together and talking about these issues. But we continued the program over a couple years, and what I found was so powerful out of it was the storytelling, right? So back to the original comment that Katherine made is it wasn't the content or the speakers or the other things. It was about the stories that were being told and how getting the women together to talk to each other was so powerful, right? Those were the things that actually moved people forward. The examples that we shared when we got women who were general managers to come and talk about their stories. It was those things that moved people mentally forward in removing their own barriers to where they wanted to go. And then in the second year, we initiated sort of, we don't want to just affect 100 women, we want this to affect more women. So we asked the women to champion doing it in their own markets, to take the content that they got from the once a year events and create their own mini events in market with their hotels and their communities. And then we saw the power of it try to extend by keeping that network together. So I guess I use that example because I think it's the power of the network that can really reach people in scale. And so, but it does take effort to get it off the ground, but it can have a sort of life of its own once you do.
Mm-hmm.
So you're both extremely busy. You're busy at work, you're busy at home, but you also have served as mentors yourself. But as mentors, I'm sure you've been approached by various and many employees looking for that support. What are you looking for before you say yes? Let's start with Katherine.
I think, it goes back to some of the things you discussed. I really enjoy talking to people who've done sort of the mental homework themselves and who have a really clear sense of what they do and don't know. You don't have to have all the answers, like nobody does. But what I don't want is someone to be just be like, so, what should I do? What do you think? Do you know of any jobs for me? I'm like, I don't even know you. Like, how am I going to find a job for you? Like, I don't know what you should do. Like, what do you think? Do you think I'd be good at this? Well, I don't know. Do you think you'd be good at whatever that is? I think you have to, I love engaging with people who are truly doing the homework to think through what excites them and are interested to learn what excites me. And then actually, as Peggy said, you can start to tell stories and be like, well, here's how I figured that out. And how are you thinking about it? And you can connect on that emotional level because you've both, kind of gotten into that space where you can see how valuable it is. And you're actually creating a connection there, as opposed to me talking to someone at 2:30 because they found my name in an alumni database and they're kind of just going through a list of people and whoever emails them back, they're going to call. I think you have to, we are social creatures. We innately respond to emotional cues. I want to help everyone I can, but it's a lot easier for me to help somebody if we both put in the time and we're both at that space where we're both trying to solve the same problem. I mean, I'm still trying to solve that problem. I think we all are, right? Like, where do you go next? What's important to me? What works? What doesn't work? That's a great conversation to have. You can't really start with that if you're talking to someone who hasn't even begun to scratch the surface of that. So.
Yeah, that's fair. I think it's harder for me when people reach out blindly, right? And I look for how thoughtful their email has been about how much they've thought about it themselves. So I use that same filter. More often, I have people internally reach out, or I see people or, leaders on my team find somebody who's high potential, and then I try to set up time with them, or they set up time with me. And I'm almost always saying yes to that because I can't say no. I love doing it, and I just think it's so important. And, I know how important those conversations were to me in my career development. And I feel like just being able to unlock something for someone can make a big difference. So
it's extremely gratifying.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
Really is.
When it goes well, it's extremely gratifying because what could be better than hopefully using some of your years of experience to help someone else? It's an amazing thing when that can happen.
I agree.
Thank you. We have 5 minutes left, just to give you warning. Peggy, you spoke a little bit while we were off camera about the work that Marriott is doing in Bangladesh. Could you share with the audience a little bit about that, because it's such an interesting program? Absolutely.
I'd love to do that. So the Asian University for Women is based in Bangladesh, and the university attracts women who are maybe first in their families to go to university, but many of them, it started, many of the women in the garment factories had never had a chance. Like, they would grow up and then their job would be to go there, and they would be working obviously to keep their families, to sustain their families. And so these scholarships were created to both pay for the families to run their lives and pay for the women to go to university. And so Marriott got involved a couple years ago to help with scholarships, raise funds for scholarships. So we do a big event in Hong Kong to raise money. More importantly, we also sponsored 75 mentorships. So we looked at 75 of the students, matched them up with students around or associates around all of our hotels around Asia, and we mentored students, and then we brought interns in. And more recently, we've brought a couple of people into jobs in our hotels. And so it's a really amazing place. I encourage you to go look it up and learn more about the Asian University for Women.
Great, thank you. We have a question from the audience. The question is, we know that C-suite executives are too busy to mentor. For new managers, who do you think they should approach for mentorship?
Well, just I think it depends on what you're trying to learn. Again, like I actually don't think it's a loss that you can't get a hold of your C-suite level people, because I think you can get a lot of value out of everyone below the C-suite. So that's okay. Honestly, I think you should try to think of two things. What do you want to learn? What do you want to hear more about? What specific, problem, function, skill, whatever it is, what do you want to think about? What do you want to have a conversation about? And then make a list of people that you think can help you answer that. And then do what, Peggy suggested, reach out, ask someone to make an introduction, try 4 or 5 people, because not everybody will get back to you. I wouldn't start with, I want someone at this title. I would start with someone who has the knowledge that you think can benefit you. And that could be someone at all levels of the organization, quite honestly.
Perfect answer. I agree.
Well, I think we're out of time. Peggy, Katherine, thank you so much for your time, for sharing your experience. It's pretty clear that you both are not just wonderful professionals, but also very giving in regards to your mentorship of other young professionals. So thank you for all that you do.
Thanks for having us today.
Good night.
Thank you.